Have you ever given so much that there was almost nothing left of you, and wondered if it mattered? We live in a world that praises abundance, yet rarely honors those who give their last drop. This is the story of a dry well, a forgotten circle of stone at the edge of a desert village. Once it overflowed with laughter and buckets of cool water. But years passed, rains grew shy, and the voices around it faded. Now it holds only a single trembling drop, the last proof that it once carried life. The well could have guarded that drop forever, a relic of what used to be. Instead, one morning, as the sun burned red across the sand, it let go, spilling its final gift into the soil beneath. And something unexpected began to grow. This story holds a truth that might change how you see giving, not as depletion, but as creation. Because sometimes the smallest act of surrender plants the greatest seed. The well stood alone at the edge of the village, a hollow memory of its former self. Once, its water sang through buckets and laughter. Children used to race barefoot to its rim, women hummed songs as they filled their pitchers, and travelers bowed in gratitude before moving on. But seasons changed. The rain forgot the road home. The soil hardened, and one by one, the footsteps vanished. Now, silence pressed down like the heat. Cracks lined the stones of the well's wall, the kind that spread slowly, like sorrow no one names aloud. Inside, darkness held what little was left. A single drop of water, trembling in the hollow like a tear that refused to fall. Every day, the wind would whisper rumors of the river miles away, a place where fish still danced and trees still knew how to bloom. The well listened, aching with a thirst that wasn't its own. It wanted to believe it still mattered. But what purpose does a dry well serve when no one comes anymore? Once, a farmer stopped by, an old man with calloused hands and eyes clouded by years of drought. He looked down and saw only dust. "You're finished," he murmured, his voice barely louder than the wind. "No one can drink from you anymore." Then he left. His words sank into the stone like another weight to carry. Nights stretched endlessly. The well watched the moon drift above, round, full, generous, spilling light it never seemed to run out of. The well envied that abundance. "Why does she always have enough to give?" it thought. "Why was I chosen to empty?" One evening, as the horizon dimmed to ash, the well heard a sound, faint, fragile. A small seed had rolled near its base, carried by the wind. It rested there, half buried in dust. For days, the well watched it, unsure whether to hope. It had nothing left to offer, not even a handful of cool soil. Yet something inside stirred, an ache, not of loss, but of memory, the memory of giving. That night, when the stars opened their eyes, the well felt the drop tremble again, that last, shimmering piece of itself. It could hold on, preserve the memory of what once was, or it could let go. But to let go would mean emptiness. To hold on would mean silence forever. The desert waited. The wind listened. And the well, the dry, cracked well, began to wonder if its worth was never in what it kept, but in what it could still give. At dawn, when the desert still held the cool breath of night, an old traveler approached the well. His robe was torn, his sandals worn thin, but his steps carried the calm rhythm of someone who'd walked farther than despair. He rested his staff against the stone and looked down into the darkness. "You still hold something," he said gently, as if speaking to a living soul. The well stayed silent. For years it had forgotten how to answer. The traveler knelt, placing his palm against the warm stone. "I've seen rivers that roar and vanish," he whispered, "and I've seen quiet wells that give even when no one is watching. Tell me, what do you choose to be?" Deep inside, the well felt the small drop shimmer again. "What choice is there?" it wanted to ask. "I am almost gone." The traveler smiled, as though hearing its thought. "There is always a choice," he said. "Even a single drop can decide whether it dies in silence or gives life in faith." He pointed toward the tiny seed lying in the dust by the well's edge. "That seed," he said softly, "was carried here for a reason. Perhaps it's waiting for your last gift." The well shivered. "My last gift?" it thought. "But if I give, I will be nothing." The traveler rose, brushing the dust from his knees. "To give your last drop is not to end yourself," he said. "It is to continue differently. The world needs givers more than it needs witnesses." He turned to leave, his voice fading like a prayer. "When you can no longer hold, pour. That is how light moves through darkness." The desert fell quiet again. Only the wind replied, weaving his words through the air like threads of meaning. For a long time the well pondered. The drop quivered, caught between fear and faith. It could not see what waited beneath, only the dry earth yawning open. Could it matter? The well asked itself. Could one drop awaken the dead ground? The traveler's words lingered. When you can no longer hold, pour. That night, as the moon rose, pale and patient, the well finally decided. The drop trembled once, then fell. It vanished soundlessly into the dust. For a moment, nothing changed. Only the hollow echo remained, vast and lonely. But beneath the surface, unseen, the earth began to drink. Something ancient stirred, and though the well felt emptier than ever before, a strange peace settled within its stone. For the first time in years, it had given again. Days passed. The sun carved its path across the same silent sky, and still the well waited. It felt hollow, stripped of the one thing that had once made it matter. Yet within that emptiness was something unexpected. Quiet. A peace that didn't demand to be filled. Then, one morning, a scent drifted through the air. Soft, green, impossible. The wind carried it like a whisper from beneath the earth. The well listened. From the dust near its base, something had broken through. A fragile stem, trembling, reaching for light. A single leaf unfolded, then another. The seed had awakened. The well could hardly believe it. The soil that had known only heat now pulsed with life. It wanted to weep, but it had no tears left, only the memory of them. Days turned into weeks. The small plant grew into a sapling. Roots spread deep, anchoring themselves in the very earth the well had once thought dead. And though no one came to fetch water, the village began to notice the green shimmer at the desert's edge. Children returned first, pointing and laughing. The old farmer followed, hat in hand, his eyes wide with disbelief. "From you?" he whispered, touching the young leaves. The well stayed silent. It didn't need to answer. For the first time in years, the wind that moved across the stones didn't sound empty. It carried laughter again. And deep within, though the well was dry, it no longer felt useless. Because in giving its last drop, it had learned the oldest secret of the earth, that emptiness, when offered freely, becomes a cradle for new life. What the dry well discovered that day was not loss. It was purpose. For years it believed that worth was measured by how much it could hold. It thought being full was the same as being useful. But the truth it learned through emptiness was this: giving is not about possession. It's about participation. We live in a world obsessed with having more. More money, more recognition, more proof that we matter. We hoard our kindness until we feel safe enough to offer it. We hold our affection like a resource to be budgeted, our time like gold we can't afford to spend. And in doing so, we dry ourselves from the inside out. Not because we give too much, but because we never release what we already have. The well's single drop reminds us that the act of giving transforms the giver first. When it let go of its last drop, it didn't die. It became part of something larger. The drop seeped into the ground, disappeared, and returned as life itself. That's the hidden physics of compassion. What you release doesn't vanish. It circulates. Giving, in its purest form, is not transactional. It's faith in motion. It's believing that what leaves your hands will still serve the world, even if it never returns to you. Think about your own last drops. Maybe it's time you could have kept to yourself but spent helping a friend. Maybe it's forgiveness you offered without an apology in return. Or maybe it's a small act of courage, a kind word, a meal shared, a promise kept. Every drop you give changes the soil around you. And even if you never see the fruit, something is growing because of you. But here's the paradox. The more we give, the more we create the conditions to receive. The well, by pouring out its last drop, made room for roots to reach deep into the ground, pulling new water from unseen depths. Likewise, when you give, you open yourself. You make space for new energy, new people, new possibilities to flow in. Look at your life right now. Where are you holding too tightly? Where have you mistaken survival for stinginess, self-protection for wisdom? There is a difference between depletion and generosity. The former drains, the latter circulates. To give doesn't mean to erase yourself. It means to trust that what defines you isn't what you keep, it's what you contribute. If the dry well had guarded its last drop, it would have preserved its emptiness forever. Instead, it risked disappearance and found renewal. The question then is not, do I have enough to give? The real question is, what if giving is how I become enough? Because generosity is not about abundance, it creates abundance. It is how love moves through scarcity. It's how hope survives drought. And every time you give, your time, your heart, your listening, your patience, you become like that well, a source of unseen water that keeps the world alive. So when you feel spent, when you fear you have nothing left, remember the truth hidden in the stones of that dry well. The end of your supply is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of your legacy. So here's the question only you can answer. What is your last drop? The one thing you've been afraid to give, your time, your forgiveness, your trust, your talent, because you feared you might run out. But what if, like the well, that final act of giving is what renews your world? What if the emptiness you dread is simply the space where new life begins? Today, take one quiet step. Give something small, a call, a note, a kind word, not because it's expected, but because it's needed. And when you do, don't measure what you lose. Watch what grows. Because the world doesn't change through grand gestures, it changes through small surrenders, the kind no one sees but everyone feels. If this story found you at the right time, write in the comments, "I will give my last drop." And if you believe the world needs more stories that remind us to give, not just to gain, like, share, and subscribe. Because generosity, in every form, is how we keep the world alive.